Clear. Hey, first of all, I want you to hear this. I'm looking at Education Week, and the headlines from Libby Stanford, and this is brand new. It's only several weeks old. Charter schools have evolved over the course of 2 decades, and their students now show greater academic gains than their peers in traditional public schools, according to a new report from a group of researchers who have studied the evolution of charter since the year 2000. So can we put this to a rest? When a charter school is done the right way, it is very beneficial to these kids for a lifetime.
Absolutely true.
All right, good. No more arguing on that when you have people from the Parents Campaign or somewhere else try to tear that down. So,
well, and Paul, our annual report actually mirrors that research. So it demonstrates the longer a student is with us, the better they do. Our junior high kiddos are outperforming their comparable peers, and so that just really syncs up nicely with what the report said.
Well, it's not only that, though, but when you start taking it in context, understanding these kids are coming from the most underserved, whether it's the teachers, the school structure, whatever it happens to be, from families sometimes. So to say that they're outperforming regular public school is really even more of an achievement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. It's exciting news. And it's something that we're proud of, certainly with the gains that we are making in our own portfolio.
Can you give me a little bit, and for the people maybe who have just heard you for the first time, a little bit of an assessment and numbers out there, how many we have as we start the school year?
Yep, absolutely. Well, first of all, I am super, super excited to be back with you, and so I appreciate the invitation always to get to chat with you. We have had an awesome year this year. We are going into the 23-24 school year, opening doors to about 4,000 children in 10 different schools. So since 2019, we have actually doubled the number of schools, increased enrollment, and making some great progress in the charter community. So it's exciting time to be in the charter world.
Do you have, how many people are on the waiting list or working on this as far as adding additional ones?
Are you talking about children on the waiting list? No, I'm talking
about number of schools or applications or people who have interest.
Yeah. This application cycle, we had fewer applicant teams to apply than we have in the past. We have one in the pipeline who is a repeat applicant, and we are currently in that process. So this is the independent evaluation team reviewing the details of that school's application, and then the board will actually vote on that in September.
Well, I guess one of the things that you want to find out is the reason it slowed down or the reason you don't have more applications.
Right.
Is it because there's no interest in it, or number two is you make it too hard to get there?
But I think it's a combination of things. I think, number one, we don't have a lot of qualified, ready, prepared applicant teams that are ready to put forth a compelling application, bring that forth to the authorizer and the reviewers, and demonstrate that they are going to be ready to open and operate a charter school. The other challenges that you see are obviously around money because it's expensive, and we've talked about that before. It can cost you up to $500,000. So you've got to have philanthropic support. You have to have access to additional dollars, such as charter school program dollars through the CSP grant. Got to have the money, and you got to have the capacity on your team to be able to bring whatever vision you have to life.
The ones that have been successful so far, you said we have 10, and again about 4,000 kids. The ones that have been successful so far, did the spark start from an organization of people who are in the business or grassroots and parents?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a combination in our portfolio. So we have what we call CMOs, which are the charter management organizations, and they come in and then we have and apply, and in our case, they have several schools. Then we have the grassroots, what we call mom and pop shops, that are really community-driven, and that they see a need in their own community, and they go forth, parents, and everybody's engaged in it. And Midtown Public is actually a good example of that one.
Of all the 10, they're all in areas where their tax base is low for the most part, and that makes it more difficult also.
That's very true.
Is there anything you need from the legislature when they convene in 2024? What do we need to kick this into higher gear?
Well, first let me say the legislature's been very good to us. They put forth 10 years ago a really dynamic charter school law. It's not perfect. There are, certainly tweaks that we need to make throughout. Some minor things, technical amendments in terms of reporting times and things like that. But to help the schools, we're going to be asking and looking for things like teacher certification. How are we going to address, number one, the shortage of teachers that we have, and then how can we ensure that we meet the standard that's already in the law, or change the law so that our schools, don't have to have as many certified staff as is required under the statute right now.
I don't think I've asked you this before, but when the teachers move over to the charter format, they don't lose PERS or anything else, do they? I mean, they're still teachers in public school systems.
No, they don't, but our schools are not in PERS. So our schools they wouldn't lose their PERS to come to work for us, but they won't be in the PERS system anymore because our schools do some other type of retirement benefit, such as an IRA.
Is that common? Is that common in charter schools across the country?
Yes, and our schools are eligible for it. They have just not applied for it. It's terribly expensive. The employer portion of retirement it really takes a hit on your budget.
So if you are short of teachers, that may be an attractive thing to be able to do that.
That's right.
Is it selective? In other words, would all the teachers have to do the same thing, or you can stay on PERS if you want to deduct the money?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure. We are planning our back-to-school meeting, and one of our school leaders in particular asked, can we have a conversation with PERS?
Yes.
Can we bring them to the table? Can we have a conversation with them and find out what it would take for our schools, because they're eligible, what would it take to implement that? And how would it impact their budget? And then who would be a part of or not?
You're not talking about a large university. You're only talking 10 schools. So how many teachers are we talking about?
That's right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last thing.
You're talking about 10 schools. How many collectively, how many teachers are we talking about?
About 300, I think.
Ah, okay. When we start in January, and I don't know if people don't want to catch people off guard, but when we start in January, we're talking about the 4-month session. So even the virgins who are there for the first time, they're going to be around for a while. We're talking January, February, March, and into most of April.
Right.
So it's a long time for that one. Anything that you're going to be presenting?
We will. Well, let me say this. We've already met we have a legislative committee that is a subset of the board members. And so we've already met with our council and with some others to talk about what does our legislative agenda look like? What are our priorities going to be for next year? And they will be a combination of ask. There'll be a combination of what we need to improve our practices and support there, and then what the schools can benefit from. So the fewer burdensome requirements that we place on a charter school, it allows them more flexibility. So if we can relieve them of some things and improve the statute a little bit, that'll be great for charter schools and growth in the community. Charter
schools are overseen by something called the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board. This is the executive director, Dr. Lisa Karmacharya. Do they have autonomy as far as school year? In other words, all 10 of them, they can decide if they want to be on one format or the other?
Absolutely. And
are they on both?
They are on, but yes, most of our schools go to school longer than the traditional schools. They don't, if you're on a 180-day schedule, some are doing the modified schedule this year. Ours do a variety of different things, and especially around training their staff. They spend a lot of additional time.
We got a quick segment coming up right after the break, but I do want to ask you this. As far as an update and analysis on any of the changes, we talked about accelerating the approval, and that's been one of the conversation topics, so we'll ask her when we come back right after this.
All right.
Are we there?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We are engaged in a project with NACSA right now. The NACSA is the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. That project is a nationwide group of authorizers looking at evolving the application cycle. So how can we, as authorizers, review, revise, and shift our focus from so much paper to people? And what are we going to do to engage and encourage additional touch points in the process and even community-centered authorizing? So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go through this project. It's everybody is seeing and feeling the same things in terms of the applicant teams that are not quite ready. Hearts are good, intentions are good, but having a compelling application, one, and then the capacity to carry out that vision, two, is difficult. And SR1 is a great example. That school is going to open this fall in the next week or so. They're going to serve children in Canton, but they took an extended runway to do that. So they went through the application cycle, and then they spent a year and a half or more getting ready to open the doors. It's time consuming, and it's expensive.
What grades are those?
Those are kinder first.
I got you. I do want to ask you this, though. In another problem with a PR in this whole debate here is you're taking money away from the public schools, and the public schools suffer. And I know when we go back nationally, and we say this to people because I'm just reporting the facts, when they do the studies, they actually find in a vast majority where the public schools become better because they tightened up for one reason or the other. But have we seen in the 10 places where we have schools here that the public schools have suffered because of that?
It suffered because of the
in other words, pulling the resources, or pulling
I don't
the students
see that
out
at all. I don't see that the children moving to our school or the money following the child to our school has a negative impact on those schools whatsoever in terms of their funding. There is sufficient funds, or are sufficient funds available for those traditional schools and districts.
Yeah. So when you start looking at it nationally, and again, I think it's going to be a big topic in the new legislative session on 2024 when they start in January. But, I mean, school choice is on fire across this entire country. And it to me, is one of the greatest failings of a supermajority in this state is for Republicans to stop acting like Democrats and to do this and act serious about it. If we're ever going to do it, now's the time to get it done. And it's going to benefit every child.
100%. I mean, I 100% agree with you on that. I think when we begin to have those really deep, meaningful conversations about school choice and options for family, I think it energizes everybody. I think, there's a way to coexist and complement one another. Yeah. I don't so much think of it in terms of competition, but really complementing one another, learning from one another, and growing together. The rising tide lifting all the boats.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of having some significant conversation about options for school choice and options for families.
Minus a 15-year study period by a study group about this too each summer. So I don't think we need that. But the other part of that is with the election coming up on Tuesday. If I have a child in an underperforming school, that would be the number one question I would ask that candidate. And I want a promise, I want it written in blood, would he or she support school choice? So think about that one also. Dr. Lisa Karmacharya, always a pleasure. You're always informative. Thank you for taking the time, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good to see you, and I look forward to our next conversation.